Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Yognai. I am a certified wound care nurse here at the University of Miami Hospital and Clinics. The University of Miami Ostomy Support Group is dedicated to bringing ostomates, their families, and friends together to help assist one another in the process of adaptation to their life with an ostomy. It is my pleasure to be your host for tonight, and I'm truly excited about the topic for this presentation, holidays with an ostomy. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I want to mention that during this session, you can submit your questions and comments in the Q&A box located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We will get to the answer at the end of the presentation. Now, allow me to introduce our speaker for tonight, Molly Atwater. She is the director of the Young Ostomate Outreach and chair of the Young Ostomate Outreach Committee for the United Ostomy Association of America. She underwent ileostomy surgery in June 2017 after more than 20 years struggling with chronic constipation. As a board member, she advocates for ostomates aged 18 to 50 at the national level and frequently speaks to support groups about ostomy challenges. She also helps plan the young adult track at the national conference. She runs the social media account Molly Holly Ostomy, found on Instagram and Facebook. She teaches more than 20,000 followers about life with an ostomy using her platform. She can be reached for questions and comments at molly@water@ostomy.org. Thank you in advance for being here tonight and welcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I am so excited to be here. I've done a lot of these sessions, but I've never talked about the holidays, and the holidays is something with a chronic illness that I have a lot of experience with. So just a little bit of background about me. As you just learned, I am the director of the Young Ostomate Outreach Program affiliated with UOAA. But my ostomy journey it began way long ago when I was an infant, not directly with an ostomy, but I was born with chronic constipation. I visited GIs from the time I was 3 months old, all throughout my childhood and into my teenage and young adult life. The doctors could never really figure out what was going on with my colon and why things weren't moving the right way. And they kind of figured that I would grow out of all of my slowness and constipation eventually with a mixture of diet and exercise, the right hydration, eating enough fiber, all of the typical tried and true methods for dealing with constipation. But in October of 2016, after limping along with chronic constipation for more than 20 years at that point, I ended up in the hospital with what they determined was ischemic colitis. So colitis that was created by blood flow being diverted from the colon. And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Once I recovered from the colitis, I was in the hospital for 13 days, but my digestive system never fully bounced back. So following that traumatic experience, I ended up having ileostomy surgery in June of 2017 at the age of 22. And since then, I've had a total colectomy. I've had 2 other ostomy revisions and have a myriad of other conditions that I juggle on top of my ostomy. So as I mentioned before, dealing with chronic illness and the holidays is something that is near and dear to my heart because of when all of my health issues kind of started and reared their ugly head. So I ended up, as I mentioned before, I ended up in the hospital for 13 days at the end of October, which meant that I was just coming out of my hospitalization and beginning my recovery period right around Thanksgiving. And it lasted into Christmas. So as you can well imagine, those couple of holidays were not my favorites. They were tremendously difficult, both physically, emotionally, mentally, all of the above. And so when I think about living with an ostomy or chronic illness at all times, but especially during this holiday season, it's really important to think of some tips and tricks and ways to navigate this season, despite what may be going on with your health and your body and your mind. So to kick it off, I know that the holidays can be a time of stress for a lot of people, regardless of their health conditions. So I'm going to kind of break it into 4 categories. So we'll start with how to manage travel, and then we will jump to how to manage food and drink, and then getting into the more touchy-feely subjects of managing your emotions and listening to your body and knowing when to push it. So let's start with some of the more concrete stuff. When it comes to travel, this is definitely the time of year when we are getting on planes, trains, and automobiles to see loved ones, to get back to our families, to celebrate with people both near and far. So when it comes to traveling with an ostomy, the biggest thing is to be prepared and to have more supplies than you think that you will ever need. As we know, you cannot typically find your supplies at a typical drugstore. So it's not like if you ran out of supplies, you could hop down to your local mom and pop CVS to pick up some extra bags. So whenever I am traveling anywhere, regardless of how far, regardless of how long, I always bring at least 1.5 times the amount of supplies that I will need. So in an average week, I do 2 bag changes. And if I'm going somewhere for a week, I will bring enough for 4 bag changes. That way, just in case something happens, I know that I am more than covered for the cases, the worst case scenario, basically. I also like to, especially when you're traveling in an airplane, the airlines are notorious for losing luggage. So I always carry my ostomy supplies and any of my crucial medications on board with me. That is a carry-on, and it's actually part of the flight accommodations to treat any sort of medical carry-on as not one of your one carry-on and one personal item. So I typically travel with my my backpack of music and books and my purse. So that's my carry-on and my personal item. But I also carry a small suitcase that has my ostomy supplies, any IV hydration that I require, and any of the medications that I need. So that's technically 3 bags, but because it is a medical exemption, they have to accommodate. When it comes to traveling on an airplane as well, you can download from the UOAA website a TSA card. What that will do is you can print it out. I have it laminated just so it's a little bit more protected. But on the front, it talks about how I have an ostomy and what that is, that it's a diversion that transmits waste to the outside. And I like to present that to a TSA agent whenever I'm going through security, so that if for some reason anything on me gets flagged for whether it's metal or liquid or something like that, the officer who is going to do my pat down or examination is aware that I have an ostomy, and TSA is trained in dealing with ostomy. So there should not be any issue with having to remove your ostomy bag or showing it if you are uncomfortable with that. So definitely know your rights. And if you do not have a TSA card, I highly suggest downloading one from UOAA's website. The other thing when it comes to TSA and your ostomy supplies, you typically are not supposed to have any sort of sharp objects. So scissors for cutting your wafer to the size of your stoma is typically a no-go. Unless they're short scissors, I think they're allowed to be an inch. Don't quote me on that, but it's a certain length of scissor blade that you're allowed to have. So if you don't want to potentially lose your ostomy scissors, what you can do is you can pre-cut any wafers that you were taking on board with you. The same thing goes with any sort of odor reducer, lubricating deodorant, any sort of liquid that might fall within the TSA requirement. Make sure any of the larger forms of that is in a packed suitcase. Otherwise, they will potentially confiscate it unless it is proven to be a medical necessity. If you are extra cautious and you want to get a doctor's note about what your conditions are and what you should and should not be subjected to, that is absolutely welcome. TSA likes to see as much documentation as possible, especially when it comes to things that they may not see on a regular basis. So whenever I'm going somewhere for a long period of time, which means that I have to have a lot of supplies with me, I do get a doctor's note so that when they see me roll up with an entire suitcase full of tons of ostomy supplies and IV hydration, they're not completely caught off guard. Another thing when you're traveling on an airplane or a train car or anything like that, make sure you've got a water bottle with you. Especially for TSA, you can't carry an empty water bottle in with you, but there's plenty of water fountains that you can fill up in on your way to your gate, and you can carry any sort of electrolyte powder. So Pedialyte, Gatorade powder is great to make sure that you stay hydrated on your long flights. The other thing that I've noticed whenever I've flown with my ostomy bag is you can get some ballooning. So because of the air pressure changes in the cabin, sometimes the ostomy bag will fill with a little bit of air. So I would definitely advise hitting up the restroom before you get into an airplane or a train, and definitely a car, so that you don't have to worry about either navigating a bumpy flight or bumpy train ride to empty your ostomy bag, or taking an early stop in your train or in your car ride. If you are traveling somewhere where you're a little bit more sensitive about the odors, maybe you're traveling to a family member's house and it's all one shared bathroom and you're a little bit self-conscious, make sure you've got some odor reducers. So you can either get those through your supplier in the form of lubricating deodorants. I personally like to travel with a case of Altoids and put those in the end of my bag when I empty, so that the smell is tampered down a little bit, which helps with any sort of house guest situation. And odor definitely depends on some of the foods that you eat. So we can jump right into managing your food and drink on these holiday occasions. So I don't know about you, but a lot of the foods and beverages that I consume during the holidays are way different than the foods that I would typically consume on your day-to-day meals. So that may mean they are a little bit fattier. That may mean they're a little bit richer. My biggest advice for food is know your body and know what you can tolerate. All of us are different in terms of the reasons that we have our ostomies, and we're all different in terms of the ways that our body can process food. So for some people, ostomy surgery may completely open up new avenues for you to eat food. Maybe you were really, really restricted in your diet before ostomy surgery, and now you've got a whole new world, which is wonderful. And then there are others like me who may have a little bit harder time processing high fiber things or high fat things. So we need to be a little bit more careful. Overchew your food as much as you possibly can. That way you can avoid blockages. There are few places that are worse to spend a holiday night than on your way to the hospital because of a food blockage. So chew. You can't do it enough. And also just kind of keep in mind when you're about to have foods, whether or not they are foods that you're eating for the first time, or foods that you've never really had in large quantities. So if you are about to have your first Christmas cookie in a couple of years because of your surgery, maybe take a nibble of one of the cookie legs, or don't eat the whole thing with all the icing, just to make sure that everything goes through your body the way that you want it to. If you are more sensitive to foods and you feel like things could be a little bit more restrictive, that doesn't mean that you can't have fun with your holiday meals. I personally can't eat a lot of typical holiday foods. So this past Thanksgiving, I had my mom make mashed potatoes for the rest of the family, but since that was a little too rich for me, I had her make a homemade baked potato for me, which is not something that I make for myself a lot. So that felt very festive. And then instead of the desserts that the rest of my family was participating in, I made myself some vanilla pudding, but to make it more festive, I added a little bit of pumpkin spice, the cloves and ginger and all the nutmeggy stuff that makes a pumpkin pie so delicious. So I was able to participate in the festive food experience, but in a little bit more creative way. I've also done, instead of having turkey on Thanksgiving, I've made turkey-shaped pasta. And instead of having store-bought applesauce, I've made my own just so that it felt a little bit more homemade and put the effort in and had a little bit more fun with that. So even if you think that you are more restricted in your diet, it can be fun. The holidays are stressful, and if there are ways to bring some joy to something that might otherwise be a stressful experience for you, I 100% recommend it. So that's food. When we talk about beverages, a lot of beverages in the holiday season are alcoholic. And we know that alcohol is a natural dehydrator. So for those of us with ileostomies, colostomies, especially, we need to be very vigilant about the amount of water that we're consuming and the amount of electrolytes that we have. So that doesn't mean that you can't have alcohol. That means that maybe you have a drink and then you have some water, and then maybe you limit yourself for a couple of nights so that when it's Christmas night and you want to have some spiked eggnog, you feel like you can do so without risking your health. Also remember that any sort of warm beverages can count as your hydration. So heat up that coffee and tea, make some warm hot cocoa to sit by the fire. But definitely don't forget to stay hydrated in this season. It's especially easy to ignore it when it is cold and you don't really want to be drinking a cold glass of water, but that doesn't mean that it isn't important. That's all that I can think of for food and drink stuff. But if you have any other tips and tricks that you like to use during the holidays, feel free to share them in the Q&A section, and I'll check those out at the end. So again, the travel and the food and drink are definitely more cut and dry, concrete concepts, typical tricks that you can apply. But I find that the more challenging part of the holidays is the mental and emotional aspect. The holidays can bring about a lot. It is very exciting. It's an exciting time, but it is a stressful time, and it can remind you of things that may have been true in the past that may not necessarily be true now. So when I was going through the beginning of my experience with heading towards ostomy surgery and dealing with my chronic illness kind of kicking in right around the holidays, it was very challenging for me to think of what I could do previously and what my body was capable of doing now. And so I really, really advise giving all of your emotions the space to be felt. All emotions are valid. They need to be felt in order to be processed. So if you have a down day, you're having a blue Christmas, that is a-okay. You are allowed to wallow. You are allowed to feel that grief and anger and sadness. My one thing that I would advise against is wallowing for too long. I typically have a 24-hour rule where if I'm in a negative mindset and I just need to feel that sadness and anger, I give myself 24 hours, and at the end of 24 hours, then it's time to figure out what I'm thankful for, what good things have come in this season of life. And that's a really good way to honor the emotions that have emerged, the negative ones, and also give space and value the emotions that are a little bit more buoyant, that give you a little bit more energy and joy. When it comes to navigating your illness or other chronic conditions around family members and friends, remember that it is up to you to disclose as much or as little as you want to. Some people, like myself, are completely open books about everything medical that has happened. But there are also some times, and for a lot of people, that's all the time, where you don't really want to bring up all the medical trials and tribulations that you've been through. So if that's something that is bringing you stress and is weighing on your mind as you head into this holiday season, I would advise taking a couple minutes and just kind of trying to figure out what a good escape strategy would be if that topic of conversation is brought up and you find yourself in an experience or in a situation where you don't necessarily want to answer any sort of medical questions. So my typical go-to when someone asks, oh, how I'm doing and how's everything medically, I typically say that everything is good, knock on wood. So excited that I'm able to eat a baked potato this year. And then immediately jump into, oh, what Christmas cookie was your favorite from dinner tonight? Just kind of trying to acknowledge that the individual is trying to not necessarily gain information, but just trying to sympathize and empathize and let you know that they are caring for you, and also kind of moving the conversation along after acknowledging that. I've definitely found that people who ask about my medical condition and what's been going on in my life, it's not from a place of nosiness or intrusiveness. It really is from a place of trying to care and connect and find a place of compassion. So definitely give the benefit of the doubt if you are uncomfortable in those situations, but feel free to divert the conversation if you do end up in a situation that you feel uncomfortable in. That's kind of turns into finding your team for your holiday season. So it's important for everybody, but especially those of us with slightly limited resources in energy or other chronic illnesses, or even time because of doctor's appointments. Find that team around you who can boost you up and keep you sane during this season. Maybe that means someone that you can call on a Friday night when you've had a really, really long week and just need to vent. Maybe that's someone who can pick up some of your holiday shopping if you give them a list, because you either have run out of energy or it's just not going to happen in your timing. Finding the people that you trust and feel comfortable with and feel safe with is hugely important as the season gets more stressful. That can be your immediate family. So that can be a spouse, that can be a parent, that can be a child, that can be a friend or a coworker or one of your neighbors. But just find that team that will rally around you and validate you and honor whatever you're feeling and help in as best a way that they can. In terms of saving energy, it's important to know your body and know where your limits are in terms of energy wise, what you can spend your energy on and what you may want to pull back on. I typically, when I look at my holiday plans for, let's say Christmas week, maybe I know that I really, really want to take a walk with my parents on Christmas morning before we open presents. Maybe that means that I plan on having a cozy sit by the fire and read time during the afternoon of Christmas so that I'm fully energized for that dinner. And maybe I skip the walk on Christmas Eve so that I'm fully ready to go on Christmas Day. It's all about knowing how your body will respond, setting boundaries for yourself, and honoring what you are capable of doing. And don't, it's so hard, but try not to compare what your abilities are now versus what your abilities were in the past. We always evolve through our medical experiences. And so it's not fair to ourselves to compare who we were to who we are. So be kind to yourself and be gentle with yourself during this holiday season. I see Carlos has got his Santa hat on, which is in perfect keeping for my next thing, which is just wear something festive. There are, especially now that we've been in COVID season for almost 2 years now, there are not a ton of excuses to get all dressed up and fancy. So use the holidays as a time to wear something that makes you feel good and makes you feel confident. Maybe that is a sparkly dress. Maybe that is a fancy Santa hat. Maybe that is your favorite pair of footy pajamas. Whatever it may be, just find something that makes you feel good and makes you feel a little bit different. Not different, but something that makes you feel festive and kind of out of your normal day-to-day world. You can also, this is kind of tying back into the notion of validating who you are now versus who you were previous to a chronic illness or an ostomy. It's time to get creative, and it's time to figure out what traditions work and what traditions may not work. So maybe before you had ostomy surgery, you had this gigantic feast every Christmas night, and you went to bed and your stomach hurt so bad because of how much food you ate. Maybe that's not necessarily possible or wise now that you have an ostomy and you may be up in the middle of the night, emptying your bag all the time. So maybe instead of doing that major binge eat on Christmas night, you break it into several different nights, or like tonight I'm going to have a really, really big piece of pie, and then the next day I'm going to have a really, really big main dish. You can also, especially depending on your energy levels, how active you can or cannot be, maybe if you used to go out and do a turkey trot every Thanksgiving morning since you were little, maybe you do a turkey walk around the block, and that's a-okay. There is no comparison between who you are now and who you have been in the past. And I know with ostomies, there can also be a little bit more challenge with food traditions. So maybe instead of having a big meal or getting together with friends for a cookie potluck or something, maybe you all get together to watch a Christmas movie or walk around the neighborhood to see the lights. There are plenty of ways to augment current traditions, and who knows, maybe you might even create a new one. And that is just as important as continuing what used to be. It's just as important to figure out what you can take forward with you into your future. All in all, the holidays are a time that should be very joyful. I know that it is not always the case, especially after a couple of years that we've had with COVID. It's been a lot of hardness. It's been a lot of loss. There's a lot of grief out there. But my hope is that with some of these tips and tricks, you can really try to find some of that happy holidays. So that is all that I've prepared, but I saw some questions and answers coming through. So I'd love to take the opportunity to answer some of those. So let's see.
Thank you very much, Molly, for this excellent presentation and your valuable advices for our guests. We have seen a great question coming from an audience, so I'm going to help you today with the questions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
The first ones that we have, it's what snacks do you recommend when traveling?
What snacks do I recommend when traveling? So I am a big fan of pretzels or like bags of Cheerios, stuff that is easy, that won't go bad. Bananas are also good. Things that will kind of keep your ostomy and output a little bit more regular. So I tend to find that with higher fat foods, things get a little bit more liquidy and a little bit runnier. So trying to bulk up on those starchy foods. So potatoes, white bread, all the stuff that makes things a little bit thicker tends to help. In terms of other snacks, yeah, it's really, for me, it's a lot of things that I know won't go bad, things that I know I can throw in a suitcase, and whenever I eat them on a trip, I don't have to worry about an expiration date.
Thank you. The next one, it says, what about carbonated beverages with colostomies and urostomies? I have
Good question. Yep. So carbonated beverages, from my experience and from plenty of other ostomate experiences out there, does increase the amount of gas that will go into your pouch. It is not something that you need to be afraid of. It is just something that you need to be cognizant of. So maybe I try to limit my carbonated beverage intake to before about 4 p.m. That way my bag doesn't start filling up with air and almost bursting in the middle of the night. So if you kind of time the way that you consume those beverages, that may help mitigate some of the air releasing. But worst case scenario, if you notice that your bag is starting to fill with air, all it takes is a quick trip to the bathroom, a little opening up, and everything is all fine and good.
So our next one, thank you. Our next one would be, how do you deal with disposable of your soiled full bags when on a cruise? And how do you deal with snorkeling or swimming with ostomies? I'm sorry.
Yeah, those are great questions. So in terms of dealing with any sort of used ostomy bag or ostomy products, I always travel with a small, I basically have a toilet kit that hangs on the back of my door whenever I travel so that I know where it is. But in that travel kit, I have scented diaper bags. So they are typically used for if you have an infant and you're doing diaper changes all the time, you can throw those in and then chuck them in the trash can. But the ones that I use, which I love, they have a kind of baby powdery smell. So it completely masks any sort of ostomy smell that you are well aware of at this point. And so whenever I'm traveling, or even when I'm home, I will do my bag change, put all of my used supplies into one of those bags, and then tie it up. And then I don't feel quite as bad about putting them into a public receptacle or anything like that. You can typically find them. I've gotten them at big box stores, so a Costco or a BJ's or a Walmart. I've also gotten them on Amazon. That's not the only solution that you have, but that is the one that brings me the most peace of mind, because I know that everything is compact and has a good smell, non-offensive smell. And so that takes care of disposing of supplies. In terms of snorkeling and swimming with an ostomy, that is something that you are 100% welcome to do. I've done it plenty of times. So the key to either swimming or snorkeling or doing anything water related with your ostomy is making sure that you still have a good seal on your appliance. So I would advise if you're about to go swimming or something with an ostomy and it's been 3 or 4 days since you last did a bag change and it's kind of getting to the end of your bag change cycle, maybe you should do a preemptive bag change just so that for your own peace of mind, you know that everything is fully secure. You can also add either tape around the outside of your wafer or typically the ostomy companies like Hollister and Coloplast and Compotech will sell stickers that will fit around the outside of your wafer if having the extra adhesive is something that would give you some extra peace of mind. I have noticed whenever I've gone swimming that the built-in filters tend to malfunction. So some of the ostomy bags that we have from manufacturers will have like a small charcoal filter up at the top to help with the air release and try to keep them odor prevented. But whenever I've been submerged in water for any period of time, it tends to malfunction a little bit. So I have a little bit more ballooning than I normally would with a fully functioning filter. That's pretty much it. The longer that you stay in the water, obviously, the more your adhesive has a risk of coming off, but I've never had that experience, and I've done workouts in the water for 90 minutes at a time. So I wouldn't be super concerned about that. If you feel comfortable wearing a bikini and having a bathing suit, swim trunks that does not hide your ostomy, go for it. There's no reason that you must hide your ostomy when going swimming. But if you feel more secure with a one piece or some sort of wrap like a stealth belt or a belly band to keep everything a little bit more contained, you are more than welcome to do so. I know plenty of people who swear by their belts when they go swimming. And you are allowed to go in hot tubs. That was one of the misconceptions that I originally had with an ostomy. You're just going to want to monitor the amount of time that you're spending in the hot tub. Probably when you start to get a little bit hot, your stoma's probably getting a little bit hot too. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, we keep having great questions. This one says, does a patient need to be concerned because his or her pouch is filling up with air while in a plane?
Good question. So I wouldn't be concerned about it. That's just something that will happen due to the air pressure changes within an airplane. But kind of like with the carbonated beverage question, it's definitely something that you should be cognizant of. If you notice that your ostomy bag is filling with air, and when mine fills with a ton of air, I'll start to feel a little bit of tugging on my stomach. And so at that point, if the seatbelt sign is off and there is no turbulence, that might be a good opportunity to head to the front or back of the plane to use the lavatory and empty the air out of your bag, just so that one, it's not going to cause a leak of any sort, and two, it's not super duper uncomfortable for the rest of your plane flight as it pushes against your seatbelt.
Thank you. And always, when holidays are coming, we always think about weight gain. What would be your advice for our guests?
That's a good question. So obviously with holidays, there is the chance of weight gain, as you just mentioned. Weight gain for ostomates is not riskier per se, but it can shift the way that your ostomy is positioned on your stomach. So I would just follow the same rules as everybody else in America or anywhere else in the world, and just kind of try to keep in mind the idea of moderation, and maybe go overboard on the things that you really, really, really love and just take a step back on the stuff that you like, but it's not your mom's apple pie or something like that.
Thank you. And it's your name here? Okay.
There she is.
I'm here.
So Molly, thank you for coming and doing this presentation for us in the name of our University of Miami Wound, Ostomy, and Hyperbaric team. We want to give you thanks for your support and for being part also of this project. And you would like to add something else, Yakni?
No, just say thank you, as you said. Thank you for joining us today. It was a great presentation. I know that all the patients that participate enjoy it, and we too. Thank you, Mo.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Have a very happy holiday, regardless of how you celebrate or what your ostomy bag brings you.
Thank you. So before we end this meeting, I would like to make a couple of announcements on what we have prepared for our next meetings. Our next Spanish ostomy support group is going to be on Tuesday, December 21st, 6 p.m. Eastern time. We will have Dr. Lauren Palmero and Elvis Manzanillo Physical Therapy speaking about Vida Activa with Ostomia, which translates into English and active live with ostomies. Our next English ostomy support group is going to be Tuesday, January 4th. At 6 p.m. Eastern time, we will have Ethan Estern. He's a clinical dietitian, and he will be talking about general nutrition for ostomy. Lots of wonderful information you don't want to miss out. If you would like to reminded about this meeting, please write your email on the chat room, and we will make sure to send these reminders. And also you can check our website at umiami.org and click onto the support group tab. All the coming meetings will be posted there. I want also to thank you all for joining us. Thank you for spending this hour with us. We hope to see you in our next meeting. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly.
Thanks, everybody.